Thank you. Welcome everyone to the Te Miromiro Assurance Risk and Finance Committee meeting. It's 9:30, so it's time to commence. We will commence with a karakia, and Deputy Mayor Kelly, can you please lead us through that?
Certainly. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E he ake ana te ātakura, he tio, he hoka, he hauhu, tihei, mauri ora. That's translated as cease the winds from the east, the west, the north and the south. Let's try to be on a good wavelength today, or positive winds. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you. We have apologies from Mayor Moko. We have apologies from Pinatui. We have apology from Tamati, Felicity. So I would like to move from the chair that we accept these apologies and grant those members leave of absence for this meeting.
Yep, I'm happy to second.
We have Kelly, we have John. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Carried. Have we got any conflicts of interest on any of the matters under discussion today? We have none. No deputations have been notified to me. I'll now move to introduce two new people to their first audit and risk meetings. Seems a bit ironic given that this was me last meeting. But we have our interim CEO, Guy Holroyd, is sitting here, and Jonathan, our new CFO. So welcome, and please feel free to contribute in the appropriate places. If everyone that hasn't met Jonathan can perhaps introduce themselves. I'm assuming all the councillors have met Guy along the track. We move therefore on to item 4 on the agenda, page 8 in the meeting, which is confirmation of the previous minutes. And I propose just to do a page turn on those, and using the numbers in the pack. We've got first page is page 10. Any matters there? Page 11. I would just highlight under 4, the bottom point. It just says completed an interest register and has filed this with the council. That is actually myself that completed an interest register and filed it. It wasn't clear. So page 12, no matters. And 13. This is the last page of the minutes. The recommendation of that is that Te Miromiro Assurance Risk and Finance Committee confirm the minutes of the meeting held 2nd of May 2023. True and correct, subject to that one alteration that I've highlighted. Yeah, do I have someone to move? Second. John and Steve. Seconding. All those in favour? Aye. Against, if any? Carried. And presumably someone will have a copy of those for my signature that we can deal with offline, so I'll undertake to deal with that. Item 5 on the agenda is commencing on page 14 in the pack. There's an update on risk management, and do we have Joshna? Joshna's on leave. Janice, you will speak to this report. I'll hand it over to you to guide us through.
Through the chair, this is just an update on the risk process that we're working through at the moment with Joshna. Joshna is new to the role of risk and assurance specialist. Following the realignment of the structure in April, we've been working on realigning the risk matrix because it no longer lines up with areas of responsibility. We're also bringing online risk software through CAMS, and that will give us a better reporting tool for risk going forward. So this is just an update as to where we are in the process and to explain why there's been no risk reporting at the last meeting or this one.
Oh,
Kelly.
sorry, if it's okay.
Yeah.
Do we move it?
I was going to move it at the end,
Oh, yeah,
but
okay,
we can
cool.
do it at
Sorry.
the beginning if you wish.
Oh, no, just when you're ready, I've got some questions.
I'm happy for you to
Okay.
move into questions.
All right, so I think it would be really helpful, and I need to understand why, the previous risk report, which highlighted, our top organisational risks, hasn't been presented to council. For those that were on council previously, we know that climate change was one of the top risks. There were affordability risks, data governance risks, the ongoing concerns about the resource consents, and a number of in the infrastructure and asset management space, and that we spent a lot of time in the last triennium building up that risk dashboard. And I think where even the snapshot of where it was at the end of the last term would be really valuable information for elected members to know what the risks were then, and then perhaps you go through, the rejig across the organisation operationally, but elected members are the ones who have to bear the decision-making risks around the risks that face the organisation. So I feel like unless we know the information from the last triennium, my colleagues, some of them may feel a bit blind, or like there's this information void. And I also wonder whether it's necessary that investment is put into CAMS or whatever it's called, when the framework that was being presented in the last triennium, a lot of time was spent building that up, but it was a good tool for elected members, and that's what this is about, making sure that elected members have the information that they need for decision making. So I don't know if there's many questions in there that you can answer, but that's how I felt when I saw that report. Kia ora, Janice.
So, a couple of comments.
Yes, you can, certainly.
So I just start by saying that I would like to see that the approach with this committee and with the reporting is that it's holistic and transparent. Probably the two key things for me. So I was reading this report and then the agenda and checking Deputy Mayor's comments. We don't have the historical risk reporting. There's been a failure there. Graham, I don't know if you're aware of the acronym BAU, business as usual.
Yeah.
It's usually used here. So talking about a holistic approach to risk, the fact that we don't have the risk reporting that previous councils have been used to should be highlighted, I think, in this report, and should feed through to the P&C section here, because we've lost a key staff member. And then that triggers a question about, well, we've had a reorganisation, we've lost key staff members. Have we got a list of those key staff members that have been lost? Have we lost any capability as a result? And is that a risk? So I'm just painting a picture of taking a holistic approach to risk and disclosure.
Councillor McNally?
Yeah, I'm going to probably just what I've written down was, did prior structure highlight any risks? Why haven't they been carried over in the interim? And what may be lost in the transition process? Because none of those risks will have changed in the business, so they should have just carried through. And to not have it, I think it's a risk in itself. That was all.
Yeah, thanks to thanks for all the comments being made. One of the issues, I got a bit disappointed when I saw this for the very same reason, that there was a lot of work done in the previous triennium to get a good risk profile as those that have been there have been aware of. And not only that, it was Council Mark actually commended it, and that the work had been done. And as Councillor McNally's saying, that the risks haven't really changed that much, so surely, given it's almost a year now, the current council should actually have at least eyes on that. I'm not against going forward and improving, that's what the whole process that we want to do, continuous improvement, but I think on the next, at least in the next, because when is that going to be? So I think at least getting that information out to councillors so that they can actually see the risk and to the new members, new CEO. Is important. That's my point. Thank you.
Councillor Core.
My comment is that I read this report slightly differently to my colleagues. So this report is not intended to have the risks register put in front of us. My understanding was that this report is telling us that they're developing a new risk model and that they've looked at what other councils have done. They've adopted the CABS risk software and they will be reporting back to the next committee meeting. So I'm not expecting this report in front of me today to have all of those risks that have been identified quite rightly by my colleague. But I do wonder if there's an opportunity here for it to be workshopped rather than just presented as a report at the next Assurance and Risk Committee meeting to enable elected members to get some governance comfort that all the concerns that they have are captured in the new reporting model.
Other comments before I perhaps try and sum up?
Can I comment?
You certainly can.
Through the chair. I just want to reassure members that the framework hasn't been lost. It's being transferred as the framework into the software, so the framework will still exist. What we're trying to do, Deputy Mayor Stratford mentioned the resource consent risk. And so what Joshua is busy working on is trying to separate those strategic risks from the operational risks and to make sure that we give you both pictures. So it was not just focusing on the big ticket items such as climate change and affordability going forward, but it will pick up things like resource consent deadlines, building consents, limbs, anything that has a statutory deadline around it so that we can report on status for those as well. So it gives you a better balance in terms of what it's reporting. We're aiming for more visual reporting with heat maps and charts rather than 15-page written reports on this. So it's hoped that at the end of this it will be more user-friendly to you to be able to understand where you are in that risk framework.
The report didn't say that.
That's why I'm here, to fill in the gaps for Joshua.
Can I just add, Graham, that I think it would be really helpful still if the last report is distributed and I total support and suggested for a workshop. That would be really helpful.
Councillor McNally, you had another point?
Yeah, on page 15, under the compliance requirements, under state financial implications, which budget revision will be made to support this decision? It says none. What's the cost of the change? And maybe we need to alter that recommendation, because while we might be accepting this report that is telling us that we're changing the model, there's, I'd like it amended to have prior risk reports be made available, timeline, milestones and costs of the change to be actually outlined in this. And this is the Finance Committee. We need to know exactly what's going on.
Noted.
Sorry, could I please request Councillor McNally repeat those four bullet points and you want to capture that in a bit more? I got timeline, costs.
We'll get Graham to do his thing. We might want it added in the recommendation. Prior risk reports, timeline, milestones and costs of this change. And the reason I want to know costs is I recall the Darwin project. Major cost, no result.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. just a few comments. The next paper we have in here includes the starting of a work plan which integrates into looking in the bottom of the first page as risk management and review of the top risks. I think the concept of a workshop, because we've got new councillors coming on board, a Risks 101 training is probably useful. Even before diving in, traditionally those workshops they dive in, everyone goes around the room and puts up their top risks. I think it's more important at the beginning to understand the theory so that you can then place the risks into a framework and understand various factors. So one of the things that I wish to work on within this is to get a work plan, have it agreed, and we'll cover this under the next point, and to make sure we understand when things should be happening, and therefore making sure that the meeting schedule is responsive to that. And that may mean that there are some additional Teams meetings for one item, perhaps the financial statement sign-off, for instance, which happens when it happens. We're not totally in control of this, and I'm sure Jonathan will have this well under control, but there can be single purpose. But I think more importantly is understanding the scope of what this committee should be looking at and getting agreement. So that's under the next item, so maybe we'll park that, but I like the idea of a workshop to actually, I guess, get the knowledge level of all the councils, particularly the new ones that haven't been involved in council risk committees before, to make sure everyone's got the base understanding and that we can actually put a framework. I totally agree that we shouldn't be forgetting about all the work that was done in the last triennium. We should be bringing that forward because there's some good work done into the program. But we're just trying to upgrade to add management's suggestion, and I think it's a good one, into a visual impact so that we can understand, and for those that are visual learners, rather than people that just read papers, have the cues coming through as to where the issues are perceived by management. Governance will also have a view on risk, and that's often a different view to management. So we need to bring that through as well and understand, because ultimately risk sits with governance. So it's an ongoing project, I guess, which I would like to see brought to a head by the end of this calendar year, so that we can actually set a really good base going forward into those. I note the comments that Councillor McNally has made along there, that we do, the software, etc., does have a cost. It's got an implementation cost and time, and we need to populate it up with prior risk. But I think what I'm hearing from management is this is all very new, and we're not yet at the stage that the software has been populated. So I think we're all keen for these things to be there, but we've probably got to give management some time. May I ask management whether it's realistic for this to be populated, or whether you're in a position to answer this at this point for the next meeting, so that we can see this done, or is that too aggressive?
Well, Chair, can we just have the last report?
We can circulate the risks as they stood at the election, definitely.
That's easy.
Joshna has been busy populating it in the background, so the risk module is the first module that's going live on the CAM suite. The project management software is following on behind, but risk was prioritised first. It will definitely be available by the end of the year. I'm not quite sure at what stage we'll be by the 31st of October, but at the beginning of August we should be in a place to report something by the end of October, even if it's just the established strategic risk without the operational risk.
So just to be clear, Kelly, the previous report, and we want to see it, we've lost the capability to produce that.
We have the previous one.
That's a snapshot.
That's historic, yes.
We can't reproduce using that old framework.
The old framework still exists.
Yes, but we
Yes.
can't. Can we produce a current report from that framework?
Yes, if we need
Why
to,
did we have it in today's?
because
report?
Joshua is focusing our time on bringing it up to date with the new stuff, so
Okay.
that's why.
So we're at an evolution point, and I think all of us want things to evolve instantly, but we need to also have a molecule recognition that there's no reason from what I'm hearing that we can't have the end of the previous triennium's risk report produced into the next pack, and therefore we'll be able to do a bit of benchmarking against where we've got to in the new system, so we understand how evolution is happening through. So I think those are...
Chair, what about the previous copy, like as soon as possible, outside of the agenda? And would it be possible at all for a report on the next agenda to just touch on, whether any of those have escalated, so that we're not a whole year on from the last report, understanding what the organisational risks are, especially as we're going into LTP.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, yeah. But that's what I was going to suggest. Even if it just takes an old report and circulates it by email to the councillors, just so they've got a heads up. There shouldn't be any time on start at all. And just evolution is a dirty word, because as Councillor McLean pointed out, Project Darwin was not exactly a shining light. It proved that evolution didn't work in that case.
Welcome, Councillor. If we can just note the builder's arrival and...
Yes.
Yeah, welcome. There's no issues with finding those prior reports from management's point of view, and they could be circulated after the meeting in the next couple of days, is that?
Yeah, I've made a note to circulate it as a briefing.
Oh yeah, cool, thanks.
So does that tend to that now?
Thank you,
Any other discussion before we've got the recommendation?
The recommendation as it is, I'll be voting against it.
So with the would you like to move we need to move the recommendation?
No, just put it, that's fine, we'll move on. It comes up in the next item, I think.
Happy to have an amendment put through.
Well, I just think this is the Finance Committee, and we need costs of these change and timelines in every report presented. Whether it's what we're doing in the changeover or not is irrelevant. It's got to be at that top standard from my point of view. So it's not going to change in here at all. It just needs to be noted. Just move it. We'll move on because it'll come up in what we're going to do. Information reports, the next item.
If everyone's happy with that, I'll move that the Te Miromiro Assurance Risk and Finance Committee note the update of the risk management report.
Second.
Was happy to second that. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against, if any? Councillor McNally.
Record mine against, please.
Noting your earlier comments. Item 6, we've got the Assurance Risk and Finance Work Plan. And again, Janice.
Nothing much to add, Chair. We've obviously been working on this work plan with yourself, populated it with when we expect certain reports to commence, but also where we're out of cycle with some others, which is what you mentioned earlier, that we might need meetings between the scheduled meetings to deal with some of these.
So I get, from my perspective, I'd be looking for feedback to come from the councils, whether there's any key items within the mandate of this committee that are not built into this draft work plan, and any thoughts about timings. Now, from a timing point of view, I had a meeting with the Mayor and Deputy Mayor yesterday, just highlighting that sometimes regular scheduled quarterly meetings doesn't tie in with the need to have various items dealt with on a timely basis. and therefore we're going to come out of this process with a recommendation back to council of what the meeting schedule should look like for 2024, and noting that there can be some items that come up that may need one purpose meeting. Other councils that I'm involved in have a range of, some are quarterly, one is quarterly, however they have 2 or 3 other meetings as and when required, not necessarily on face-to-face if it's a single item. Other councils are on to more like 6 to 7 meetings a year, so that it's better timed, and is very definitely not on a regular schedule. They can be, but it is predetermined. For instance, the annual accounts recommendation is definitely part of this committee's work plan, and we will need to make a recommendation to council on the adoption. That will need to happen some stage prior to the 31st of October, and we will need to deal potentially with any audit issues that get raised by the auditors. So there may need to be a 2-stage where we deal with the issue in the annual report in principle and some of the key accounting issues that might come up, should they, and we don't know that at this stage. The processes are currently underway, and then probably a very brief meeting to actually make the recommendation, which will be fairly close before the scheduled council meeting. So we'll need to sort of coordinate those things. As far as the risk management, we will see that there is, on the bottom of page 1, a review of the top risks and updates each meeting, I think highlighting into the points that were raised under the previous agenda.
Yep.
So in the PX portion, through you, the chair, in the PX portion is a A3 version of the work plan in detail that the chair is referring to. If that's helpful, page 1 of the work plan is what the chair.
I don't see any items in there that justify it being in PX at all. It's just the way that the packages ended up coming through.
I have a few questions, Mr. Chair. One is, I 100% agree with it's no brainer. We need a risk committee work plan for sure. It's an absolute must. And I do think we need to, for critical dates and times when decisions need to be made, we need to change the schedule so it's within those cycles. So again, no issues with that at all. I do wonder though, and here's a question, is whether the quarterly, remember this is a finance audit and risk committee, so it's got the finance component included. I just wonder whether quarterly meetings is going to be enough to actually handle this workload, and I think that's something that I must make a decision now, that's something we need to just think about and discuss. And I would like to see, and obviously it's not the place to discuss the plan in detail so much, but like the first item there, progress report with commencing in October, and this is to do with recommendations. I would love to see us focusing on delivery on some of these, so that there is actually, as my colleague here, Councillor mentions, that there's a financial cost and detail and a timeline set for everything. These things, that one item I'm using as an example, some of them have been outstanding for significant length of time. And that's one key area which I think is a big risk, and that is our failure to deliver on a whole bunch of things. So I'd love to see clear timeline set priorities so that we can deliver. So those are my comments, but definitely 100% agree with the work plan. Let's do that. Put the change the schedule, and we can go that in a bit more detail. And in terms of the reporting requirements, there's no comments there.
Thank you, Councillor. If there's any other comments at this stage on this bit? Sorry, I missed you, sorry.
No, I just wanted to say that the work program is full and comprehensive, and I look forward to us getting into it. I'm excited. And I do want to commend Councillor Vusic. He had a work program for the last triennium as well, but this one's a lot bigger. It's awesome. more work in there.
As a general comment from all the councils that I'm involved in, these things do tend to evolve, and the work level of the committee does seem to increase, particularly as we are heading into some of the most changing times I have seen, and I've been around local government for about 40 years, and the pace and rate of change is much higher, and that brings risk in itself. And with the Palmer report coming, we've got risks associated with central government philosophy changes. We've got high cost of living, delivering services to our residents is within tight budgets when they're under budgetary pressure themselves is a real challenge. And this all brings risk to the council in delivery. So I do totally agree with councillors' comments on monitoring what we've said we're going to do, and do what we say and say what we're going to do approach. And this hopefully will give a framework to come to that, be able to deliver. Councillor McNally?
Just going through the work plan, all good things. There's a couple of things. It repeats itself. This reporting doesn't align with current meeting schedule. That's in several different aspects. One is capital expenditure and financing. Do we need to change some meeting schedules?
Coming from that, I'm a believer of working out when do we need to be meeting, rather than saying, rather than trying to form life around a schedule, we need to schedule around life. And we don't have a meeting scheduled at the right time for annual accounts, for instance, at the moment. Going forward, I'd like to see that we build that in 2024 to have meetings at the right times. And that's part of the purpose of this, is to identify and try and work out what the right schedule is for the 2024 meetings.
Well, there's one there, review of valuations, should be handled about August. We've got rating anomalies due to, I don't believe we've reviewed the valuations. Review of draft annual report, that's outside of meeting cycle. It's now going to be 31st of October 2024, so it's the next year's report.
If I may, Councillor, that's why I'm highlighting we may need to have a special meeting this year to cover some of these items off.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Just another one, review of our long-term plan assumptions and accounting policies. I mean, the assumptions are the key here. The risk is around our asset management costs, because we've got further down it talks about risk management, update on projects and work streams, once again, timelines, milestones, budget management, costs, actual versus budget, monitor and report on those cost overruns. And we've got 16 search schemes, water schemes, 3 waters might change all this. Even the rates establishment, review of top risks, update. We've had a, legal issues and updates, ratings validity review, when the rates basis are changed or new rates introduced. Well, that's just happened. So my question there was, who does this? We've had a critical response by the ratepayer, because there's massive variation in that due to valuations. Another one is insurance cost escalation. I'm not sure that actually comes up in here. I think that's going to be a massive cost escalation, or we're going to stop insurance and stuff. There's a lot of other things in here, but it's time, because this all needs to happen right now, and we're 3 months away from the next meeting. I just wonder how do we catch up?
You raised some very valid points, and I don't think any of the committee members would disagree with what you're saying, that let's just absolutely characterise how risk is becoming so important within the operations of the council, and how we actually get through this workload and the resourcing that's available to do these things. On your point of insurance, I've just heard in the last, in fact it was Monday from at another council there, how the insurances are likely to become very hard to even obtain, just because of the climatic risks that we're facing, which is what the Deputy Mayor was referring to. So it's the case that the council as a whole, rather than this committee, needs to make a decision, in my view, as to how much resourcing do we need to put into this particular area of risk management.
Which is why I brought it up here really, because long-term plans coming up for workshopping this afternoon, I think, or is it tomorrow, sometime soon.
Today.
There's a raft of issues that are highlighted in here, but according to this program, we're 3 months behind. Well, we're longer than that. If you look at roads, sewer and water, we're about 10 years behind in some of that maintenance. No reflection on anyone in the room, it's across New Zealand, just underinvestment. How do we catch up?
All I can say at that point is really that I'm on a number of audit and risk committees, and this finding is common. Some of you have been to the local government conference recently, and no doubt it was a hot topic at those conferences as well.
Sure was.
Is there any other comments that people wish to raise on that report, or should we move? There being no other comments, I'll move that the Te Miromiro Assurance Risk and Finance Committee receive the report of the Te Miromiro Assurance Risk and Finance Work Plan. Do I have someone to second that? We do, John, Councillor John. All those in favour? Against, if any? Carried. Moving on to page 21 in our pack, we have an audit proposal letter for the 2023 audit, and I'll ask Janice to speak to this.
Thank you, Chair. This is the first proposal letter that we've received since the transfer to Deloitte. Last year, because the transfer happened partway through the year, they honoured the fees that were issued by Audit New Zealand. What we're seeing across the sector is quite a large increase in audit fees, whether it's with Audit New Zealand or Deloitte. So what's in this report is they are currently proposing 1,100 hours in terms of budgeted hours for the audit, with an audit fee of, including GST, $310,000. So the proposal letter is waiting for you to sign off this proposal today.
Do you have any comment from councillors?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just a comment. I understand, Janice, it's a total increase of 50k in the scheme of things, and given our time and given the cost of everything else, and I think that's pretty good. It's a pretty good price. So I'm happy that's it's not as big increase as I was expecting, so to speak. So I'm happy to support this.
Any other comments?
Just a question, what was the budget?
We're about 4,000 out, 232,000 is the budget.
I might perhaps comment from the chair, being in the sector and working around the New Zealand for Chartered Accountants Australia, New Zealand, going into practices. The cost increases within their staffing is quite significant at the moment. Really flow on from the COVID effect. We couldn't get any, we had a lot of staff coming back into New Zealand at the beginning of COVID, relocating back. We then were unable to bring the usual people from overseas. Auditing is a profession that's internationally standard, and the Northern Hemisphere season is 6 months apart from the Southern Hemisphere. So therefore there is a lot of transfers happening. In my old life we used to bring 7 to 10 people back into my office each year, and we would export out across our summer. That hasn't happened. We've then got factors of the government allowing people to leave New Zealand, and we've got 2 years worth of people have left all at once. At the same time, they didn't reopen the borders to people coming in, and it's put a real squeeze, and they're currently about 1,000 auditors short, is my understanding, in New Zealand. It's had supply and demand impacts. Other councils, this going up at base level before disbursements and OAG charges is about 20% increase. That's certainly in line with commercial audits that I'm involved in, but it is a lot lower than Audit New Zealand is asking in most cases. There's one council I do know of which the increase that's suggested by Audit New Zealand is over 100% increase, and typically it's in the 40 to 70% range. So I think you have also had similar feedback off listserv.
Yep.
So this is, to me, is very reasonable in the circumstances. So I would certainly commend this group accept the proposal.
Great. Before we move on, could I just correct my comment to Councillor McNally? The budget is 236k and the actual proposal is 240k. So there is a $4,000 gap.
Aren't you asking for 24% increase?
So if there's no more comment, the recommendation is that the Te Miromiro Assurance Risk and Finance Committee receive the report audit proposal letter June 2023, and I guess inherent in that is that we recommend that the proposal be accepted. Are people happy with the minor amendment I've just suggested? Probably we technically need to move the amendment, do we?
We haven't moved and seconded the recommendation as it was in the minutes, so that we can do a alternate motion to what you're
And I think someone
Through
then
you.
perhaps move the original recommendation.
No, we can,
Sorry.
sorry, through you,
Yes.
Graham, we can make the,
Change.
make the change
We
now.
can,
Yeah,
okay.
and move in second with the change.
Is everyone happy with that?
And accept the proposal?
And recommend.
Because there's some people in here that might not hear.
So so adding on to the June 2023 audit, continue and recommend the proposal be accepted.
Yep, I'll just put that up on the screen for us, Chair, and recommend the proposal
Maybe just second that, Mr. Chair.
accepted, moved by the Chair, seconded by the
Second.
Deputy Chair, and we'll have it on the screen in 3. We'll enlarge it, it's coming, whoa, not that big, jeez. Okay, here we go. Yeah,
Are we recommending to full council?
it
It's-
doesn't need to go to.
No, it doesn't. It's within terms of budget, so
Within our terms of reference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, carry on, thank you.
It's in the delegations of this committee.
it's within the delegation.
It is. So it's that the Te Miromiro Assurance Risk and Finance Committee received the report audit proposal letter, June 2023 audit, and recommend the proposal be accepted. Is that,
Is everyone happy with
We're
that
trying to
word?
I just want to raise a point of order because recommend suggests that we're recommending it to a third party, I think.
Okay.
So I'm not comfortable with that.
And the just take recommend out.
Take recommend out and replace it with that.
and that the,
Accept.
And that the proposal be accepted.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Cook.
Can we add Deloitte's?
They are,
I know, but for public reading it.
yes,
so
well,
from Deloitte, oh, sorry.
Accept that.
If the mover and seconder would like to,
Just end that the Deloitte proposal be accepted if we need it at all.
I'm happy. If that makes it clearer.
Yeah, and I'll second that.
No, just put it between the, take that, Casey, put it between, and
That.
that's the Deloitte proposal, so put it between the and proposal, put it there. As a ITTE.
Perfect. Are we, everyone happy that we now move and that? Now how are you seconding that, did you?
Sorry, it was
John.
yourself and John.
Sorry, John. You're happy, John, to second the revised?
Yep.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Against, if any? Carried. Moving on to the next item, which is page 31 of the pack. June 2023 audit plan. Janice was speaking with this one.
Yep, thank you, Chair. We've had the audit plan through from Deloitte. I put in here the areas of audit focus with their traffic light system. The traffic light system that they're using is to establish their work plan. This is not indicating that that's where they think the risk exists for us. It's just how they're doing the risk profile over their work plan. And you'll see that they've been briefed from the OAG to have a look at the 2023 flooding event as a high risk item. Moving on from there, we put in the reporting when they're expecting to complete their work plan, and then the final input is the group audit considerations, and you will see there that we're part of a group, so obviously Far North Holdings and the Twin Coast Cycleway Trust, Yahoo and Northern Link are all part of our group, but only FNEC and Far North Holdings are deemed to be financially significant.
Any questions on that and the attached plan for management?
Can I pose a question that's just popped into my mind, so apologies, I haven't thought it all the way through, but we are building a number of, or supporting a number of community groups of significant net, particularly our sporting hubs, isn't it? And we're putting governance in the community's hands. Is this something that we should be having some kind of audit oversight? And the reason I asked the question is we've just been through an extensive consultation period in regard to the Turner Centre that got into some serious financial trouble, and the ratepayer had to step in and bail them out. So I'm wondering if we should be taking a more proactive stance with regard to some of our other assets out there, or not. I just pose that as a question.
You wish to make a comment from management's perspective?
Through the chair, in terms of this audit plan, no, because we don't have any control or authority over those entities. But in terms of making it a condition of funding, we could. So where we're funding or contributing to those assets, part of those agreements could include that we receive their audit reports.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I could just explore that one step further. With the Turner Centre, which you may or may not be familiar with, I apologise if you don't know. This is an asset that sits on council land. So if the organisation had fallen over, council would have had to step in and pick this up. We have a number of things in the district, particularly in our sporting space, and Bay Sport is one that springs to mind, which is currently on the lease, that is not performing particularly well in the governance space at the moment. And I am mindful that we're not yes, I'm being very careful with our words. So if we have, I think there's probably a duty of care on us somewhere to have a more comprehensive level of oversight of how these organisations are performing. Because we can do a lot by getting ahead of the game rather than reacting. I'll leave it at that because we're not in the exam.
I could just, perhaps from the chair, pass some comment that the identification, you have identified a risk to the council, which should be sitting within our work plan and have some responses, which is our previous agenda item, and I think people can note that as an item there. From a point of view of the audit of the council and the council's group, those items are immaterial to the overall size. So although it's a risk to council, it's not an external audit risk that I would see that they would take in unless the exposure was so significant that it trips the materiality. And I was just trying to find the materiality in here, and you might, or Jonathan might have read this.
Page 42. I was going to bring that up in a minute.
But no, I think.
So I guess this is the difference between external audit and wider risk of the council, and I agree that the items that you've raised and that general type of performance of entities that we support, and there are a good number of them, that we need to think about the governance controls over the grants that we give and making sure that they are appropriate and encourage good governance in all the entities that we support without being burdensome for those entities as well. So it's really the balance, and I think that's a risk item as opposed to external audit would be my view. Sorry, Councillor McNally?
Yeah, you brought up the materiality. I'll just refer you to that page 42. There's a little green box there that says, although materiality is the judgment of the audit partner, the Audit, Risk and Finance Committee must satisfy themselves that the level of materiality chosen is appropriate for the scope of the audit. Our threshold is 200,000. They're looking at about 4.5 million in the total expenditure of 152 million. So our risk is high, but our scope is very low. And if you just look at, go back one page, page 41, if you look at the areas of audit focus, they refer to risk assessment process undertaken during the planning phase, so they're going to do that. Understanding the business risks faced by the Whānau District Council. And then down, significant risks and uncertainties previously reported in financial statements, and that refers to credit accounting, which is not from it, but it's about judgments. And the last thing there says, any changes in the business and the environment it operates in since the last annual report, which is the change to our risk profile because of the reorganisation. Now, if I just take you back to page 42, and the first paragraph, we all need to read and understand that. This is their words. We consider materiality primarily in terms of the magnitude of misstatement in the financial statements that in our judgment will make it probable that the economic decisions of a reasonably knowledgeable person would be changed or influenced, and this is the quantitative materiality. In addition, we assess whether other matters that come to our attention during the audit would, in our judgment, change or influence the decisions of such a person, which he's referring to in this committee, I suggest, and they use material both in planning and scope of the work. And then the last paragraph before that box there refers the quality of systems and controls and misstatements are tolerated by you in the preparation. That's back to us again. So it's what's our tolerance level. Mine's pretty low, which I just think there's a few, and I've already highlighted them, and timing of meetings and things like that. I just think there's some stuff needs to change, and I get that this is going to be a work in progress. But I just think there's some pretty clear messaging in that alone around materiality. What are we, and our audit and risk committee threshold is 200,000 out of 152 million. You do the maths, the percentage is pretty bloody low.
Any other comments before I perhaps pass some comments as an audit professional?
Thank you.
The concept of materiality is taking a user or a ratepayer particularly, and what size difference would be enough to make a difference to decisions that are made by an external party. Internally, we should have a very low tolerance to error, and I agree totally internally, but from an external provider, what sized item might it be? Now, they mention about numbers, quantitative, and what they're suggesting is in line with general audit guidance. However, things that might be particularly sensitive may have a very low tolerance to error, such as remuneration of elected officials, related party transactions, matters where there might have been transactions where there could have been a conflict of interest. Our ratepayers are going to be very sensitive to those, and that's the qualitative. So it is possible for some items to have almost a zero quantitative number if their characteristics are such that a ratepayer would really be interested. Whereas the value of fixed assets, the receivable from rates, etc., those numbers there are likely to be more appropriate to the economic decision making that's occurring. The quoting that they have done in this is actually directly out of auditing standards. So it's well accepted and would have been in the Audit New Zealand letters as well. Very similar wording. I hope that that may provide some clarity on the difference that we internally would get quite concerned over $200,000. But from an overall scheme of the council and all its subsidiary companies, not holdings in their subsidiaries, $200,000 is probably relatively immaterial. We've got an asset base of somewhere north of $2 billion. So we need to sort of think of it in the overall context. Is that useful to members as a framing?
But
Deputy Mayor.
what if it is lots of 200s, you know, across the organisation? Do they?
The compounding effect.
Yeah. Is that, what's that in a rates increase? It's quite a bit.
Janice.
Can I comment through the chair? The way this works is if audit find errors in anything that we've done, we will work with them to amend them before we adopt the accounts. So if there are errors in there that are below the 200,000, then we will work to amend them. What ends up in the misstatement schedule are numbers that either come in right at the very end that would completely stop adoption if we had to go back and do them. If they're not material, then they will report them at the back of the letter that you sign prior to adoption of the annual report.
Cool.
So that we do work through them as we go through, and some of them are a matter of interpretation, like the work we had with the bad debt one last time. What we'd done was acceptable. What they were looking at was also acceptable. So it's a judgment call between the two.
This probably discussion highlights why we need to have an Audit and Risk Committee meeting close to the adoption, where we as a committee can go through the nitty-gritty of what's in and what's out, listen and make a judgment. It's not necessarily a right and wrong thing, often it is a judgment call as to whether things should be adjusted or not. Councillor Cole.
In accepting that my inquiry was outside the scope of this report, but it is material, I think. Can we pick that up for future agenda items?
I think that we can capture that back in the discussions on the previous item agenda on the work plan and highlight that through. I think Janice has taken a note of that to bring it in, because it's the second time in my 2 or 3 days up here that same point has actually come up.
I think that the key words in that, and I get that it's part of the audit terminology, rules, whatever you want to call it. The economic decisions of a reasonably knowledgeable person would be changed or influenced. And they're using material of 4.5 million. What Councillor Courts brought up is potentially more than that, and that's 4.5% rate increase. Would it influence a reasonably knowledgeable person? Would that change our decisions? That's the point I was trying to get at.
Yes.
And I think we've got to drill down to that level of decision making. And if the knowledge around the table has to be brought up to understand it, well, that's fine.
Yeah. Yes, they are referring to an external party that is relying on the financial statements to make their decisions. We have the ability to command information, so we are probably outside the intended users, unless there was something really seriously large that was an error, such as, you know, has happened occasionally in the history, and in public meeting I won't raise an example. Any other comments?
Sorry, can you summarise that again? So what happens with the tumour centre? It comes up on a future work plan.
Sorry.
I mean, I'm just asking you to summarise that down for me. What does that mean? Something like this tumour centre comes up on a future work plan?
That should be on our internal risk register to consider in a broader sense. Not necessarily that one item that you have raised, but generally what is the council governance policies around grants and support that it is giving to organisations is probably the wider consideration. It should be, we should have that into a work plan, and it could well be added into the next agenda if committee members feel that a briefing paper of some description would be appropriate. That should give management sufficient time, but I will just ask management to confirm a summary of policies, procedures, what happens, how do we exercise governance and stewardship over ratepayer funds that are provided to these entities as a full briefing.
Through the chair, that's what I was alluding to earlier with Councillor Court's comment, that we need to make sure that we've written these requirements into the funding agreements or the operational agreements we have. At the moment, we're still working on the agreement with the Te Centre, so we can make that part of the conditions. We can do the same with the other entities that we have that are going down in that space. And we can then bring that into the work plan to make sure that we get them and review them and then report back through committee.
Can I just raise that up a little more? What happened to the Te Centre as an example of the combination of a number of things, particularly COVID and lack of traffic, a decrease in revenue? We had a number of very expensive assets that were in the company building, 3 regional sports hubs that are collectively worth tens of millions of dollars that have been run by really great community-minded volunteers. If the wheels fall off tomorrow and they walk away, those assets become ours with no planning, no budget, no thought into how we pick them up and run with them. And that could happen, and I think that's a significant risk to this organisation. And it just occurred to me when I was looking at this report, and I haven't thought it all the way through, so I apologise if I'm making it on the hook and it's not really landing for you. But you've got to seize the opportunity while it's in front of you, and I just think that this is the time to say, actually, I think we need to have a bit of a deeper dive into these.
I think that's a reasonable request.
Well, it goes back to item 6.1, the risk and finance work plan and what needs to be in it.
One of the items in there is what I call a horizon scan, and that's just what you've done, is looking out there around the horizon, seeing what risks might be eventuating, and are we actually ready for them? Do we have a playbook in place as to what to do if?
And that was one of the reasons I voted against that earlier thing, because the timelines are already too far out. From my point of view, I think the risks escalate by the delay.
The current economic climate won't be doing us any favours. So from that, is it possible for next meeting to have a paper on generally what we are doing and looking at the governance, the risks associated with these fringe entities, if I might say, where we're giving grants, we're giving support, or we could have a residual risk, just to give the committee some indications not, it's really just a horizon scan, effectively, of what's out there, what are we doing, what are the possible plan Bs. The committee happy with that, or any extension on that request? I don't think we necessarily need to limit it as such, but you've noted it into the next agenda. Any other comment on item 6.3? The recommendation is that the Te Miromiro Assurance Risk and Finance Committee receive the report June 2023 audit plan. Do we have someone to move that?
And we add the Deloitte's again.
Deloitte audit plan? I'm happy to.
Councillor McNally, moved it on, second it. And you can-
With the, you're happy with that minor amendment?
Yeah, audit plan.
Thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against, if any? Carried. We're on to item 6.4, which is on page 70. And Janice, will you be leading us through this item?
I would like to invite Zena to talk to this one, if that's okay with the chair, please.
Yes, that's fine. Come and join us. Oh, don't even have a table for her to sit at for a baker's. I'm happy for you to join the table if that's easier with the papers.
People might not want to sit next to me. I'll sit.
Before Zena starts, Zena is the new team leader for transaction services and compiled this report. This is the end of June position for debt recovery, both in terms of rates on water debt but also sundry debt.
Through the chair.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me to the table. So this is the final report for the end of the financial year of 2022-23. As at the 30th of June 2023. As we go through the report, you'll see that apologies, this is the first time I've presented, so I am a bit nervous.
We've had breakfast at your home.
So I'd like to go through the general title rates that the revenue recoveries have reduced the balance by 41% and the general title water rates by 61%. Through our team's actions, the mortgage demand process was completed and final demand was issued to all banks and financial institutions. With that, one financial institution, we received the money post the end of the year, so that will not show in our numbers at the end of this report. It will show in the next report. If we had received that money by the end of the financial year, we would have increased our reduction in the water on our general title by 43%. Also with that, statutory demand proceedings have started against properties that are owned by organisations with Law North. Law North are also working on financial assessment applications for properties where judgment was received but no payments have been made. We have also completed the recruitment of a new revenue recovery officer due to the realignment and with myself moving into the new team leader role that became available. So with our Māori freehold land, you can see that we have reduced as well with our percentages. where are we? So 11% we have reduced by the start of the year. 6.29% of that was for multi-freehold land emissions. And the water rates on multi-freehold land were reduced by 8.93% since the start of the year. We move on to the sundry debtors. The sundry debtors age debt balance has reduced again since the start of the year. As you can see that the resource consent and the building debt have increased. The revenue recovery team continue to work with both teams. The 90 to 90 plus day debt has seen an increase, and we are in the process of completing an analysis to understand what is driving these increases. I believe that is everything. If anyone has any questions.
Do we have any questions on this report from members?
I was just curious about the mortgage demand payment. I'm not familiar with this, but when there's a mortgage on the property, the banks become liable for the rates.
So with our recovery action, we have two options. One is that if a property has a mortgage on the account, so that option is that we send notification to the owners of the property and also their mortgagee. Okay. That is listed on as a vested interest to notify that we will be starting the mortgage demand process. In the initial letter, we do offer 3 months notice that the customers have that time frame to contact us to set up a suitable payment arrangement that meets our criteria to hold the final demand process on mortgage demand, or to pay the arrears in full.
So mortgagors typically pay those and add them to the
we tend to have a bit of a mixture, so we do have some that it will be paid by the mortgagee up front, or the ratepayers will contact us directly to set up those payment arrangements to hold the final demand after the 3 months.
Thank you.
Just a point to add to that. When we make the request to the bank, it's up to the bank to determine where they take the funds from. So we ask for it to be added to the mortgage, but if they choose to take it from other accounts or other balances, that's their prerogative under the agreement they have with their, under the mortgage. It's in the fine print. So we make the request. How that transpires into the customer's accounts is at the bank's discretion.
Sorry. In the report, it says that, I might be missing a page, but it says that the freehold land is in a separate report, mighty freehold land, and it's missing. We do normally see that. I love it here, but we do normally have a separate table of general title and mighty freehold, and because the rates have been going up consecutively, over the years, the values table I don't find very helpful. That's why I've always asked that the previous year the number of accounts is in there. So, how you've got the number of accounts, if you have the previous year's number of accounts at this time too, that actually gives us an idea of whether it's improving or getting worse, which, I look at this, I feel like it is getting worse. And I know, I don't know whether you can speak to Zena, but just in passing from some ratepayers and staff over water cooler chat and hearing that there's a huge delay. People are contacting the rating department and the rating department are getting back to them, but they're swamped. So people just need to be patient. The team will get back to them. Do you want to?
Through the chair. We have seen a significant increase in our ratepayers contacting revenue recovery, and those are the accounts that have arrears on it. that they are struggling with payments of the rates and with the increase of the rates. The revenue recovery, we are more mindful of what's going on out in our communities, and we are aware that with the cost of living, there is a struggle. So we are working with our ratepayers, whether we offer a short-term payment plan on a reduced amount to help them get through, and then we start to increase those payment arrangements. We are pushing for the rates rebate applications as well, and we are just trying to work as best as we can with our ratepayers. It's more of pay what you can now, so then that way the debt doesn't get too large and then you don't get overwhelmed by the amount of debt you have.
Yeah.
Just a question, oh, sorry. Sorry, just a question, when, on the rates recovery, do we impose penalties on top of that, or if they contact you, is a waiver of penalties?
So, through the chair, sorry, there is a way that we do offer the payment arrangements. We do offer the penalty inhibitor a penalty inhibitor. So on the account, so they do not incur penalties through that time. We also do offer if they do sign up to a payment arrangement, that after 6 months of good payment history, they can apply to have the penalties remitted on the account.
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is a risk committee, and while we're just receiving a report, I appreciate that. I do wonder, and it's sort of been raised, you can see the questions being asked and the concern, I think around the table, of given the tougher financial times and given the recent valuation, and Councillor Dave raised that in a council meeting, I do wonder what would it be trending like in the coming year, and that's something that we don't seem to report on, but I think it'd be quite useful to know that what are we actually facing in the coming year, and given that affordability is one of our biggest risks we identified, and to actually have some sort of feedback for the council panel, so in our decision making we can be mindful of the impacts.
Through the chair, just in regards to that, the revenue recovery team will be looking at doing pre-calling to our customers that after the first instalment that would normally have paid, have missed, will be ringing them to make contact with them to see if there's a payment arrangement we could help them set up. It's just to gauge where we are with the community and to keep our finger on the pulse with what's happening within the community. Unfortunately, we can't project if people are going to pay or not, but it's about being proactive and reaching out to those and offering alternatives instead of just being reactive.
So just through you again, Mr. Chair, it's really getting back to the governance table, what the front line is actually seeing, so we've got an idea of what impacts our improvements are making, so that we can be mindful of this and not put undue pressure, and therefore be where necessary, be a lot more prudent with our spending. So that's really I'm saying is if we can, I'm not asking you to predict the future, but just give feedback, which you are verbally doing, of just the stresses that are actually on our roadways.
And through the chair, I'd like to address that. I have asked the revenue recovery team to start a tally of what kind of issues we are encountering with our ratepayers when they do call in, and that I can add that data into our next report of what we are seeing and what the trend is within the community.
That's if the chair's happy and everybody else is happy. And I will determine just by myself.
Sorry, one more koretake issue. It's not koretake, but I myself, am a AP payer, automatic payments. But sometimes, on rare occasions, I've been given penalties because, say I make a payment on a Wednesday, but the closing date was the Tuesday. Just saying. And I think one of the things that Northland Inc., when they did one of their innovation workshops, was that successful businesses have multiple ways of dealing with clients. You have lots of different issues that are, they're not all in one box, they're not all just one way of doing things. So, and I wonder about the council staff dealing with these multitude of issues that people face, and our ability to respond timely and in a way where they don't get penalties. That's all.
Question on that, are the penalties applied manually or does the system automatically apply them? Because I've made payments late and not had a penalty, or the penalty hasn't been taken, and times where I've been a day late and I've got a penalty.
Through the chair, it depends on the value that you are touching a penalty to. I have found myself in the same space because I was making an automatic payment and I hadn't amended it for the year, and then all of a sudden on the fourth instalment I got a penalty. But that's because the amount accumulated through to a value that triggered a penalty, because the small amounts don't trigger. We do try and ensure that all receipting is up to date before we apply the penalties, and then the system generates the penalty based on the outstanding amounts at the end of that quarter date. But if it's a mistake, then you can apply for the penalty remission if it just missed.
The form's like not worth the effort sometimes. The form is so daunting for any other.
I just have a last question on these tables. This is not intuitive, but the 6140 for the general time rates, is that the total of arrears?
6 million,
Yes.
Which is just because debt recovery action, the other categories could be in the debt recovery action. You see what I'm saying?
Through the chair, the 6,140,000 is the total rates arrears.
Or general title.
General title.
Councillor McNally, you had a question?
Yes, similar lines to what our CE's just asked. Is there any advantage in showing some of these totals as a percentage of the total rate collected? Just as that's one question for Zena. Oh, well done on the presentation today, thank you.
Through the chair, we can show that as a percentage as well.
I'd like the chair to ask, is there any advantage in it from your...
I had a few comments that I might just...
Oh, well, I'll ask the next question then.
Yes, getting graphics for those that are visual learners about this year, last year, how are we tracking percentages of total rates that are overdue, so that we can understand, because apart from your narrative, and without reading that, I wouldn't be aware of the good progress that's been made.
Yeah,
on the track.
Yeah, 41%.
We need to celebrate success.
Yeah.
In those areas. With regard to the economic climate, by the end of this year, just about all the beneficial low interest rates from fixed mortgages will have rolled off. So I expect this issue will become worse over probably the next 6 months. And if you trust the economists, then the interest rates will be dropping, and we'll should be able to see our ratepayers seeing reductions in their mortgage payments, which is a primary factor in feeling whether you're feeling well off or not. And so my prediction would be that we'll see an increase in issue probably through to about March or mid next year, and then we should start seeing some benefit if the economists' predictions are correct. So, we are in tight times, but all this $6 million is sitting there. Of course, the $6 million we don't have to spend as a council, and yet we've assumed in our annual plans and long-term plans that we were receiving it. Yeah, so that does create a squeeze on providing the services our ratepayers expect. So we're in a difficult situation of being compassionate about circumstances and yet being squeezed about being able to put the services on the ground that our ratepayers are expecting. So it's a difficult no-win situation.
And then just the debt of general general rates, debt recovery action to commence on 4 million against the rates total of 6, that's 66%. What's the, what are the recovery costs in that? I'll just ask, there's 3 questions in a row. And then on page 73, the water arrears, 670,000 there that are legal action commenced or about to commence, debt recovery action to commence. You know, so there was the mortgage run, legal action and debt recovery. You know, it's quite a big chunk of 670 against the 800. So that's why I was wondering what the recovery costs might end up at. And then on the sundry debtors, you mentioned that you're doing a review or looking into the why building and resource consent have not been paid, $762,000, 90 days plus. I'd just ask you to, while you're doing that review, just have a look at the consent process, if there have been delays on that, and has the project been abandoned?
Thank you. Any other questions, Deputy Mayor Kelly?
Just wanted to check, and I may have missed this in the report, are the rating accounts that are going to mortgage demand or what have you included in the table numbers, or have they been taken out?
So those that, through the chair, those that we have issued mortgage demand are on the table.
Okay, cool. And will rating sales still be coming to council?
Through the chair.
Yes, thank you. Cool.
Yes, thank you for asking the question on the building and resource consents, because there's $1.1 million sitting there, and we don't have the ability to, my understanding is we don't have the ability to, as we do with rates, to ultimately get the funds at worst at the point that the property is sold. So that's more a commercial style debt.
And so if you look at the combination of the 6 odd and that 1.1, that's roughly 7% rates that we're not collecting. It's a big chunk. That's why I was after a percentage of what is this in relation to the total rate collected.
And it'll be from delays, the amount being charged.
Yeah, well, it could be a penalty component.
Credited back to people because they've had to wait for their consent to go beyond time.
Okay, do you have any further comments from staff or members?
I would expect that, I'm just going to say, I would expect to actually maybe address your points, John, that the new risk system should encompass a lot of the issues that we've raised here in terms of the flex number on best worst case predictions, etc., etc.
If there are no more comments on this particular report, thank you very much for your very full answers, and we'll move on. That the recommendation is that the Te Miromiro Assurance, Risk and Finance Committee receives the report, Revenue Recovery Report as at 30th of June 2020.
Yeah, I'll move.
You're happy to move, Councillor McNally? Deputy Mayor, thank you. Second. All those in favour? Against, if any? Carried. Thank you.
Thanks, Nina.
Our next report, 6.5, is on the commissioning of the water supply at Sweetwater. Janice, are you going to speak to this particular item?
Through the chair. We were asked to bring this report specifically from a risk perspective of potential drought over the summer and the supply of water from Sweetwater, especially with our other eye on the future of the Carry Dam. So what this report is outlining is the actions that have been taken to try and establish the water into the treatment plant between September 2022 when the pipeline and last month. So this is as at last month. So what the report does is step you through the various issues that the operators have been dealing with and the actions that they've taken. And just so that you've got a full picture of where things are at, there is an update that's going to be worked on this week that will give you the next step outcomes from the operators as they move to actually testing the water supply into the system and what those next steps might then entail. We do need to get sign-off from the water regulators for any blended supply, so they need to be in that space at the same time.
Councillor.
I'll just get my clock because I've got quite a bit to say about this report, but I don't want to talk too long. So the history of Sweetwater goes back to when Wayne Brown was the mayor and Steve was the councillor back then, and council acquired the board. And long story short, moved forward to the Provincial Road Fund, and we were given the funding to develop the pipeline and connect the water supply through to Kaitaia, and this was critical because Kaitaia had suffered two profound droughts and there was a significant risk to public health and safety. So we fast-tracked this and a committee was put together. I was on that committee, as was Councillor Vucic, and we had meetings every single month to get this project together. So I just want to put in some perspective. It's not a criticism of Janice, because Janice was just there for the report, and as the Chief Financial Controller had financial oversight, but she didn't have operational oversight. So I just want to talk through a few things. So the Sweetwater pipeline was completed in September 2022. The Kaitaia Water Project physical works reached practical completion in June 2022. Far North Waters accepted ownership of the infrastructure in September 2022. We were involved in all of the design review meetings that were called by WSP under the leadership of Andy Hillier and staff at the time. Far North Waters were paid $350,000 to replace filters at Kaitaia Water Treatment Plant, and they were paid $175,000 to create the connection at the Kaitaia Water Treatment Plant. All of that was funded out of the project budget and contingency. The project was to develop the pipeline. The project was not to upgrade the water treatment plant in Kaitaia. It is a very old water treatment plant that's been held together by the sheer ingenuity of Far North Waters, who have been pirating bits and bobs from other water treatment plants to keep that one going. So, in the report where it talks about at bore pump 1 failure, the screen was found to have been damaged, so a replacement smaller screen was installed. The screen was damaged at the time of installation. This was known to us, and this came under the defects and liability clause in the contract, and the bore was fixed at that time. The drinking water turbidity standard is a new one to me, and that's not something that ever came across any of the agendas that came before us. As far as we were aware, the MTU threshold was met through the water samples, and all we have to do was get that water into town. What was known was, and very apparent at the time of commissioning, was that there was a problem with sand being drawn up in the water. And as a result of that, we ordered, and it was brought in from overseas, a tornado, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's an enormous piece of equipment that the water spins down, and as it spins down the water, it throws out the sand. So I'm really surprised to read in the report now that this is still an issue. So according to all of the reports we ever received, the water was from day one safe to drink and met all the health and safety standards. And all we needed to do was transport that water into town. What we never did, and perhaps we should have done in hindsight, was make a decision at council about what would become the primary water source. And I've had a number of conversations with our previous CEO, Sean Clark, that the Awanui was going to become the backup water, and Sweetwater was going to become the primary source of water. So when we got to the conversation about blending, I think and John Busich was there at the time, and he'll may have a better memory on than me. I don't think we ever had a conversation about blending. It was going to be one or the other, but not a blended water source, because that is extremely problematic, because what we were doing was taking water out of the aquifer that was meeting the NTU threshold and blending it with water from the river, which was in a very degraded state. So why would we do that? That just doesn't make sense. And I tried yesterday searching through the mountains of paperwork that I have at home to find a report on that, but I wasn't able to find it in time for the meeting today. The water treatment plant was never designed and is not set up to accept blended water, which is what reinforces my belief that that was never our intent. The other thing the report talks about is the generator, and what the report misses is that we spent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars putting in an 11 kV line. So there's electricity right to that site, and we put the generator in purely on the grounds that if there was an outage from Top Energy, we had a generator there to ensure that the water supply into Kamataya was maintained for public health and safety. What else have I written down? I think I probably covered the nuts of what I wanted to cover. I think for me what concerned me about the report was what's missing from the report rather than what's in the report. The report does not give a comprehensive history and the decision-making process that led us up to buying the bore, the public hearings that we held to get the pipeline. The pipeline goes through multiple private properties. Kelly was part of the hearing. We made that decision to go ahead and put the pipeline through. It's got a number of rising mains and pump out stations. So the issue of having to pump the bores for up to 5 hours and allow that water to drain through the neighbouring property, this is completely news to me. So what I would like to do is request a more detailed report be supplied to the Risk Committee. A report that goes back to people like WSP, Andy Hillier, Benji Popman, David Clamp, all of the people that worked on the project that have the knowledge, because you're relying on mine and that's always risky. Glenn might be able to help a little and put together a package that talked about what we set out to do, and we did set out to do that. What still needs to be done, and it was always in the hands of Farming Waters to come back to this council with a request to upgrade the water treatment plant in town, so that we had a modern fit-for-purpose water treatment plant in town. Because that was our pinch point. It's not the water, it's not the pipeline, it's not the electricity, it's not the sand. The pinch point is the water treatment plant, and I think this council needs now to make a decision if the primary water source is going to be from an aquifer, which it should be for the health and well-being of the people in Kaitaia. That's what we spend all the money on. Then we need to design the water treatment plant in Kaitaia to do that. I think it's probably more of an infrastructure lens than a risk lens. I think I've covered all my notes. I might reserve the right to come back if someone says something that prompts my grey matter.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I know Mackie wants to say something as well, but there's a few things that disturb me. Actually, I wasn't on the committee in the last trip. I was on beforehand. But one of the things that I'm concerned about was, if you read this, it shows, to be honest, a failure to deliver big time. I look at some of these words, I think, well, what's going on here? Like when it says, I'll give you some examples. When it says the risk of supply, this is a great unknown, and it talks about the bore level drop. Now, right back in the beginning, 2013, 14 training, we did test the bore 1 that was available there and ran it for 1 week more than necessary, and it was capable of delivering the 2,500 cubic metres per day, which was what was expected of that bore, 5,000 being the total that they wanted to achieve out of 2 bores. So, and yes, there was sand in it. And here is something else which I don't have clarity on. I did ask that question. Now, one is colloidal silica, which is totally different than silica being sand particles. Both are silica, but they have different properties. One has very, very fine particles. The colloidal silica is down at 30 to 100 nanometer size. And for those that know PM10 size and PM2.5, you have to divide that figure by 1,000 to get down to nanometers. So it's very small. Ultrafiltration can get rid of it, but it's quite difficult getting rid of colloidal silica. So is it sand or is it silica? And why are we asking questions at this stage? And this is something else that goes through. Well, look at it. The silica in the sand, the water can't be treated. With the silica in the sand, the water can't be treated. So I presume that if we're referring to colloidal silica at this stage, because sand, as Councillor pointed out, the cyclone, which is a centrifuge created water, takes out the sand very effectively, and that should be done at the source, not at the treatment station. That's easy to do. Colloidal silica is another thing. Now, right back at whenever that date was, right back, I think it is prior to 2011 or 12, so when the hearing was first done, Councillor Radish may know, they tested the water and they knew what was actually in it. This is my concern, that what we're facing here, and I'll get right to the point, Mr. Chair.
Sorry.
Can I just perhaps just interrupt here? You're probably in danger of running into matters of commercial sensitivity and that sort of thing. I'm wondering whether we should leave it and move it into PX and then make a decision at the end of that what should be released into the public session.
Potentially, I haven't raised it.
Yeah, I'd second that, Chairperson.
Yeah, but let me say that this report then, I'm concerned that we seem to have a significant risk looking at us when I read this, and I'd like actually to know where it's going to go. And so, and perhaps a bit like Councillor Court, not necessarily asking for another paper, but I'd actually like the assurance that we've got this project under control as a risk committee.
If members are happy, can we take this to public excluded, then at the end of that make a call as to what should be coming back into publicly available, because this will be of high significance to the community up there, and we need to be transparent, but we also need to have a full and frank discussion on the matter, where we can perhaps get to a specifics, which could be commercially sensitive potentially.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mate.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Why do we have to be sensitive? Why?
To protect individuals or companies that might get.
Is that right? All right.
Right.
Can I just say something? Look, particularly to you, the chairperson, this whole project has been an absolute shambles. I live 4 minutes away from the aquifer, and I know exactly what's going on. When I see an executive summary on page 75 that says the risk is that the supply from the sweet water will not be in a usable form prior to the summer season, and this may be further impacted by the withdrawal from the Carry Dam. And yet, on the 9th of December 2021, in a press release from the project manager, his comment was, Sweetwater on project is on track and will be completed in May of next year. Budget spent 16.7 million. Then we get Blair King on the 28th of September 2022. Draws are working, steady flow from...
Excuse me, councillor, point of order. We have a point of order.
The reason I would like us to use PX is to protect individual privacy and companies. Please, Councillor Radich, do not use anybody's names.
So we have two options.
I think...
Listen, I'm switching off.
Okay.
Thank you.
3, 4, 5, 6, and babe 7 still have quorum.
We just note that Councillor Radich has left the meeting. We do still have quorum. But I propose at this point that we move this discussion to PX. We have careful consideration at the end of that as to what we bring back into the public arena, and it's clearly a significant issue that we have to deal with here, but we need to be able to have full and frank discussion and then correctly inform the residents of the issues by way of what we bring back into public meeting, without endangering confidentiality or any potential damage to any individual's privacy or rights.
Yep.
May I suggest through you, the chair, that we go through the last item in public and then
Yes.
Have the whole.
Exactly what I was thinking, that we move to item 6.6.
So we're going to leave this lay on the table?
Leave this stay on the table, and we'll reopen it again
Once we come out of the product.
into PX, and then we'll report back out
We
afterwards.
have a move and a second for that, I think.
Yes.
That's the chair.
Do we have a mover for that approach?
Yep.
Deputy Mayor, seconder.
I think Councillor Court will.
Councillor Court, will you seconding?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was a million miles away, most certainly.
Thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against, of any? Carried. Moving on then to item 6.6, which is people and capability quarterly update. Do we have, is it Jill? Are you speaking to this item?
Through the chair, I'll take the report as read and take any questions.
Feel free to come and join us at the table so that you're not speaking with your laptop.
You're staying away.
Well, I've heard just 6, so Steve seems like the safer option today.
Wrong.
Oh, dear.
No, you're safe. All ladies are safe with me.
Excellent. Do any of the members have questions on this report?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to comment. The obvious one they're staring at is the significant rise in trending rise in I should say, in turnover there. So do you want to comment on that? I suspect you all know the reason, but do you want to comment?
Yeah, I mean, the report does highlight the fact that we're in a tight market. Some of the key reasons people have left is for career progression. We are up against consultants that are private organisations that can lure people, which we've been experiencing for what, 2 or 3 years now, and genuine family commitments. But yeah, I've written, we've got a report that we are reviewing our retention and attraction strategy. We're doing stay interviews with people in the organisation, and also looking at how we can get people into the organisation as well.
So is delivery on projects and services at risk with the current staffing and with the plan going forward? Can we actually deliver on our projects and services, or there's a risk that we should be aware of?
That has not been highlighted as a risk to me, but we actually do have a priority work plan workshop with the leadership team on Monday, and I will ask that question.
I can make a couple of comments on this.
No other members?
Oh, yeah, I do, yeah.
Are you happy
I
with
can wait.
our Chief Executive to comment first?
I was just going to suggest that perhaps there's elements of this one. So first off, I think this ESC section is inadequate, but elements of it would need to be moved into PX. Talking about personal grievances, which are there. I think what we've just seen today from various comments that we've actually had a lapse in our risk reporting as a result of losing key staff, losing resources. So I think we need to add a section in here on, as John was just alluding to, have we lost any capacity or delivery as a result of staff turnover? I think we have. It's challenged business as usual. We need more transparency, more insight into what's going on.
I'm happy for the detail. I believe the high-level trends, etc., that have been highlighted are capable of being discussed in public agenda. But if there's any questions, particularly getting down into PX, that is actually should be brought up under the legal report in the existing PX agenda for reasons of privilege and confidentiality. So I propose that any questions on that be placed under existing agenda item 7.3. If members are happy with that particular approach, because it is a legal matter and would fit in neatly into that current agenda.
Through you, the Chair, can I just make a comment on that? Employment legislation does not allow us, and neither does the Privacy Act, to talk openly with names regarding employment matters at council.
Yeah, even under PX.
Yeah.
I do agree with that, but the nature and general trend of that still could allow for information that could make a person identifiable, even if we're talking at a high level in an organisation with relatively limited staff. So we can't actually get that specific, but someone might be able to draw. I'd prefer to take a conservative approach to this, rather than potentially have that being raised as an issue within any ongoing litigation that the council may find itself involved in.
Yep, and I know Carla is on the line. I'm not sure if she wants to make any comment, but
Carla, you're welcome to join us for a comment.
Morning. Certainly. I would like to note that We're speaking in public at the moment?
We are.
Yes.
Yes, can I make comment when we're in PX, please?
No problems. Perhaps add it into your report under item 7.3.
Okay, thank you.
I guess my comments generally are that this is common with all councils that I'm involved in, that we are somewhat constrained and the private sector is not so constrained. Likewise, the new entities that have been formed by the government are not so constrained and have been, they seem particularly in consenting in those specialist technical areas, have been recruiting staff across the council sector as a general trend, which is leading to some of the turnover issues. So it is what it is out there. We've got to react, and it can leave us somewhat exposed from a risk point.
Just to advise through the chair, that we do have a hand raised. You can see it.
Yes.
Just so you're aware, Councillor Kappa did have his hand raised.
Councillor Kappa, can I hand the floor to you briefly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And look, I'm not too sure. I think this is quite a public question that I'm going to ask. I want to just reflect on because I've heard, do we have any data on staff returning? And if they are returning, what indications are causing staff to return, if any?
Perhaps Jill, if I can hand that question to you.
Yep, sorry, I'm just thinking. So we do have staff returning. I think to play safe, I'll say for various reasons. It's a good thing, but I probably can't.
Okay. No, that just confirms the discussions we've had with senior leadership. Thank you.
I think what I can say is some staff are wanting to come back because they've seen our new structure and they like it and they see that there's opportunities within that structure for them.
Thank you very much.
Councillor McNally.
This is general comment. Just thanks to Jill for the update and the looking at how to retain. My involvement in business over the years, retention costs a lot less than recruitment and training. And the other, because you lose so much institutional knowledge when someone goes, it's one of the reasons. Turnover is high in other businesses. My daughter's now in banking, and she's been in there about 7 months, and there's been 3 of her colleagues that were her seniors are now leaving, so she's escalating up the ladder in that particular branch quite quickly. But there's as I said, that institutional knowledge goes out the door with those people. And then I just had one question relating to page 81. It says during quarters 3 and 4, council-wide realignment. Well, we know we've been through a realignment. That suggests January, February, March, April, May, June. I thought we'd started prior to that, the realignment process. Can I just get an up? When did the realignment actually start?
Well, we had the alliance reset in October, November, and then the full group realignment started in February with go live in April.
Oh, okay, so there's 2 parts to the whole thing. So the alliance, you're talking?
The Far North Waters Alliance.
Okay. Thank you. That's all.
Any other questions from members?
Just a comment, Mr. Chair, and process. We are only asked to receive a report, so we could receive a report.
Yes.
Item 6.1, discussing the other matters.
So on that basis, that the Te Miromiro Assurance, Risk and Finance Committee receive the report People and Capability Quarter Update 1 April to 30 June 2023. Do I have a mover for that? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Do we have a seconder? Councillor McNally. Any further discussion? All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, if any? Carried. Thank you. We're now at item 7, which is the resolution to exclude the public. We note that the matters, we've got 7.1 being confirmation of the previous minutes, 7.2 Far North Holdings Limited Risk Register and Risk Report, May 23. We've got the current legal action at 7.3 and proposing that we add 7.4, further discussion on Sweetwater water supply, and the basis for that being section 7, subsection 2A, C and H. And perhaps if Carla is available just to check that that is the correct interpretation of those sections, please.
Can I just query, can you just bring the Sweetwater one forward? I have to leave to get to a voting meeting.
I hear that, and we'll perhaps deal with that order as the first item when we go into the order of operations there.
I'm happy to move the public.
As if Carla can confirm that those were the right sections before we move this.
Carla, it was, through you, the chair, sorry, Graham. Carla, it was there, 7.2A and 7.2H.
A, C and H were the subsections I saw could be applicable. Is Carla there?
I am here. I'm just reading the, are you referring to the withholding grounds just for the confirming the minutes? There are various withholding grounds for each report.
Yeah, no, this is for the Sweetwater matter under, added in 7.4, and my understanding of that section is that the applicable sections in the legislation as grounds are probably A, C and H.
Without prejudice or advantage commercial activities. I'm correct. I know A and C and H is appropriate. Yes.
Thank you.
All three.
Thank you. Are we happy for someone to move the resolution to exclude the public with the addition of Sweetwater's matter and as 7.4?
Yep.
Using section 7, subsection 2, A, C and H as the rationale for the exclusion. Deputy Mayor Kelly, we have a seconder. We have a seconder. Councillor McNally. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against, if any? Carried. Now take a brief
On this week, what a decision? It's up to you. Just
Probably,
Have you
because
got
it will
it?
be restated. Yeah.
Peter Jackson's listening, yes.
Are you ready to go live, Eileen? Yep, I'll put it up.
we're resuming the public portion of the meeting, and in the public excluded, there was a fuller discussion on the situation with Sweetwaters, and the report was received. The committee has requested the CEO to investigate and bring a report and recommendation to the 24 August council meeting as a matter of urgency. Thank you. Is there any other public business? If not, I will declare the meeting closed. Thank you, everyone.
Closing karakia.
Oh, apologies, closing karakia.
Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te ata whai o tō tātou araki, o ihu karaiti tō mātou araki, o ihu karaiti, i te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu, ake, amene.
Amen.
Kia ora.
Thank you. Declare the meeting closed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Few interesting moments.